ومحمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على إن الله ملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بالثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دوني آلهة يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني ظل في ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومي من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذرية في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فعلنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقا قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر ألا يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Bari digar salawat. Allahumma salli ala. सदमे उठा रही हूँ मैं بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد دربار جا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد بابا یہ فاطمہ پہ مصیبت کا وقت ہے، یہ مرحلہ کٹھن ہے، قیامت کا وقت ہے، خطبہ سنا رہی ہوں میں، خطبہ سنا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد کوئی مجھے بتائے کہ کیا تھا میرا قصور، صدمہ یہ ہے کہ شہر کی آبادیوں سے دور آنسو بہا رہی ہوں میں، آنسو بہا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد بابا تمہارے بعد یہ مجھ پر ستم ہوا، محسن میرا شہید ہوا، واہ مصیبتاں یہ غم اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، یہ غم اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد بابا غریب بیٹی کی غربت تو دیکھ لو، امت نے حق نہیں دیا بنت رسول کو، یہ اجر پا رہی ہوں میں، یہ اجر پا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں، بابا تمہارے بعد امت کی ہر نقاب کو رخ سے ہٹا کے آج دربار میں لائن کے خطبہ سنا کے آج حق کو بچا رہی ہوں میں، حق کو بچا رہی ہوں میں بابا تمہارے بعد، صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں بابا تمہارے بعد، دربار جا رہی ہوں میں بابا تمہارے بعد، صدمے اٹھا رہی ہوں میں بابا تمہارے بعد۔ محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
صلوا علی محمد و آل محمد۔ دہائی دہائی خدا را دہائی، یہ دشت بلا میں ہے کیسی تباہی، بہایا ہے کس نے یہ خون محمد، قیامت ہے ڈھائی ہے کس نے الہی، جوانوں بزرگوں کو مارا گیا ہے، شہیدوں میں شامل ہے ننھا سپاہی، حسین جمیعاً غریب غریب الحسین، حسین کیا جشن برپا یوں اہل ہوس نے، شہیدوں کے لاشوں پہ ڈنکے بجائے، جلا ڈالے آل محمد کے خیمے، سکینہ کے منہ پر تماچے لگائے، جو بیمار تھا اس کا بستر نہ چھوڑا، نبی زادیوں پر بھی درے چلائے، حسین الغریب حسین شہید اور اٹھی اپنے مرقد سے بنت محمد، سیاہ شب کی چادر میں چہرہ چھپا کر گئی کربلا میں، تو اس نے یہ دیکھا ہے بوسیدہ کرتے میں ایک لاشا بے سر، بدن سارا تیروں سے چھلنی پڑا ہے، لہو میں ہے ڈوبا ہوا سارا پیکر، حسین الغریب حسین شہید تڑپ کر وہ چلائی شبیر بیٹا، لہو میں نہائے ہو سر بھی جدا ہے، تبر کس نے مارے ہے سارے بدن پر، یہ تیروں پہ کس نے جنازہ رکھا ہے، کہاں ہے میرا لال عباس بولو، کہاں ہے میرا لال عباس بولو، میں پوچھوں گی اس سے یہ کیسے ہوا ہے، حسین الغریب حسین شہید، ادھر درد و غم کی ستائی تھی زینب، جو وحشت کے جنگل میں حیدر بنی تھی، کبھی خاک اڑاتی کبھی اشک پیتی، جو کنبے کے پہرے پہ تنہا کھڑی تھی، سکینہ کے سقا کو آواز دے کر غم شاہدی میں بکا کر رہی تھی، حسین الغریب حسین شہید، اور کیا جشن برپا یوں اہل ہوس نے شہیدوں کے لاشوں پہ ڈنکے بجائے اور کیا جشن برپا یوں اہل ہوس نے شہیدوں کے لاشوں پہ ڈنکے بجائے اور جلا ڈالے آل محمد کے خیمے اور سکینہ کے منہ پر تماچے لگائے جو بیمار تھا اور جو بیمار تھا اس کا بستر نہ چھوڑا جو بیمار تھا اس کا بستر نہ چھوڑا نبی زادیوں پر بھی در چلائے حسین الغریب حسین شہید الحسین صلوا علی محمد و آل محمد رحم اللہ من قرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Dr. Saeed Shabir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Al-Fatiha is requested for the Isari Sawab al-Marhumeen listed on the screen and for all Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Ayyam is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mutarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul mutarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Shop with the Sheikh and a Cop. Our annual collaboration with Sanford Police will take place this Saturday, December 16th at 10 a.m. at the Sanford Target. This is an opportunity for us to support our Sanford community by gifting a shopping spree to underprivileged children. To sponsor a child, you can Zelle donate at masjidalhayy.org with the note Shop Sheikh. For more information, you can text Sister Sukaina Virani at 407-488-7104. Please donate generously for this cause. Ladies Wafat program this Sunday, December 17th at 10:30 a.m. We will have the ladies program for the Shahada of Bibi Fatima Zahra salawatullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Here at the masjid, inshallah. Zakira Sabah Bimani will be giving the lecture. To contribute for this tabarruk or hadiyah, please contact Sister Rafia Natani at 407-921-7454. Jazakallah. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Kirmani to give tonight's lecture with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
If you could please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the dearly departed soul of Marhum Onali Chattu, as well as for your Marhameen, our Marhameen, for all those who do not have someone to recite Al-Fatiha for them. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وعصيرا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: is there a possibility of the change in the religion of God? In order to understand this question, a question that's been asked since time immemorial, it's important for us to first understand the religion of God and then also understand what are the parameters that we have to work with. Sometimes people come forward and say there's no possibility of change within the religion of God. What was there from the beginning is there till the end. And you may find that in certain circumstances this is indeed true. But in other circumstances, there's some question marks that need to be addressed. And this is what happens in the scope and the space of scholarship. Number one. Number two, when it comes to the Lady of Light, Bibi Fatima, who we're here to discuss and commemorate tonight, we learn many things from her life that are something that may be new, something that may be different, something that may be a different parameter for those people who are living at that time to fathom. And it's important for us to understand this, especially as we're discussing gender and society and inclusion, as well as justice in society, about how we operate as people of faith within our religion and our spaces. And finally, when it comes to it, what are the lessons that we learn as other people have learned with respect to Fatima al-Zahra, and how she teaches us to be courageous, knowledgeable, understanding, but also a reflection on where is it that we may have veered off or we may have strayed away from what her vision was of a society that is beneficial to all. One that gives everyone a shot, that one that gives everyone an opportunity, one that actually allows someone to become the best version of themselves. And in that space, how is it that these individuals of the Ahlul Bayt, particularly Lady Fatima and her progeny, showed that in every time and space, there is no limit to the spiritual level one can attain, regardless of what their gender may be. This is our agenda for tonight. Wherever you are, here in Florida or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. I know you all have had a long day. I've had a long day as well. I'm going to try to keep it tight while respecting the night that we are commemorating. So please bear with me. Number one, when it comes to the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has said from the beginning, Inna deena inda Allahi al-Islam. Verily, the deen near Allah is Islam. And it has been from the beginning, from the time of Adam till this day. But what was there at that time may not have had all of those things that you and I practice as the deen of Allah. Example, when Islam first came to Mecca, when Rasulullah, we're at the time of Rasulullah right now. When Rasulullah came, he had already mentioned that before me, others have come. Isa has come, Musa has come, Ibrahim has come. And all of them had their own form of prayer in their zaman and makan, in their time and space. Now, stay with me, I'm not here to give any fatwas. I'm just giving us some moments to reflect on and to think on. When Islam came to Mecca, what did Allah ask? Was it all ahkam? But you will find that if you read the history of Islam, 13 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina, roughly, you will find that in the first 10 years, Allah didn't ask them to do any ahkam. There's no furu'ud-din, except for a few exceptions I'll mention right now. So Allah didn't say about, for example, the furu'ud-din, Allah didn't say, namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, khums, amr bil ma'ruf, tawalla, tabarra, all of this. None of this mentioned. Not in the first 13 years. In the first 13 years, you have salah. Allah is saying one thing. Number one, say La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. The first element, that's usul, principles. So first, just accept that there's one God, nobody else, and no association with Him, number one. So Allah didn't even do that. In fact, you'll find in narrations that in the first few, in Mecca, there was only the morning and the evening prayer, and that even two rakah. It was a good deal seeming to be, right? But we have not understood salah, perhaps that's why we may say that. But what I'm saying is, then when you get to Medina, and the Prophet makes the migration, there are changes that emerge. So then Allah slowly integrates, and so Allah slowly says that, for example, this is haram, and that is something that you need to be careful of, and that's something that you need to be careful of. In fact, when you go to the universities, when they explain to non-Muslims how to read the Quran, one of the things that may even help some Muslims is that if you want to understand the Quran, start from the back. Start from the end. Because many of the chapters at the end are the Makki chapters, and many of the ones at the beginning are Madani chapters, which came later. And so Allah didn't say that, imagine if you come to try to revert someone or convert someone, and you start telling them, what is Islam? Islam is all, I open up a jurisprudential book and try to explain this. That's not the fundamental element, number one. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even understood the nature of human beings. In fact, you will find, if you read Surah Baqarah and other parts of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, particularly we've been reading in the Fajr program here, some of the verses of the last verse of Surah Baqarah, where Allah talks about charity, then He talks about usury, riba, which I'll come to momentarily. And when He talks about this, you'll notice that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this, He says that there were people who even after the verse of prohibition came, they were still taking riba. Which means that Allah knew that even if I tell people something, they won't implement it right away, or they'll delay, or they'll make excuses. Or some people who came afterwards and said, Ya Rasulullah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we made riba deals, usury deals before the verse came out. Can we still hold on to those? And so the principle being, it's not just the prophets who have to deal with this notion that you'll tell people something and they're not going to listen. It's something that even the scholars know. Believe me, you bring some of the biggest top scholars of the Shia world in front of not only us, you go to other parts of the world. And you may see, if you do a thought experiment with me right now, you ask into this hall, and I've mentioned something similar, but look, you take the celebrity, the athlete of the day. In the United States, it may be a basketball player, it may be LeBron or Steph Curry or someone like that, or in this worldly soccer, in the global soccer space, Ronaldo or Messi, or for example in the tennis space, Nadal, or in things of that nature. People have just, these types of athletes. And then you ask someone from the next generation or the generation that's currently there, and some ayatullah walks in. Who are people going to be drawn to? You know very well who they're going to be drawn to. In fact, they'll be like, who is that? Is that someone's grandfather? Is that someone's grandmother? Or is it a grandfather or someone's relative? They won't even know who that is. And the reality is this, that that's not how our relationships are built. So we have to understand the world that we're living in pragmatically. Now, by the way, I'm not saying by any means to compromise on the principles of religion. Please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm just sharing what it is that already exists. And I'm not giving any fatwas even. I'm only inviting you and I to research. So stay with me here. When it comes to the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah came, Allah says, for example, in the Quran, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنبٍ قُتِلَتْ. That on that day, the newborn infant child will cry, for which sin was I killed? For which sin was I killed? Because, as you know, prior to Islam, some tribes used to bury their daughters alive. You think this is really far-fetched? I was in India a couple of years ago in a hospital on a charity mission, and I'm looking at this sign, and I'm asking, and we're asking, what does this sign say? And it said it's prohibited to find out what the gender of the child is before birth. And we asked why. And they said, look, the reason is because people have, in this part of the country, people have a strong affinity and a strong preference towards men, towards males. And if they find out that it's a female, they'll have the child aborted. And so this is not 1400 years ago, this is today. But what are some solutions to this? This is where the thinking, logical community of reason may need to come to play. And for example, there are some solutions. In fact, there have been studies that have looked at, in India, they found that when they put a call center in a particular town, and call centers usually prefer women because they found that they're more, customers prefer that. And they found that when they give economic opportunities to women, then the behavior of the parents changed. In the same lands, in India, they said that the parents who used to yesterday look after their sons, they now started paying more attention to their daughters. Because they saw that this daughter can now also be economically viable. This daughter can also be something that can be their retirement plan or whatever it may be. So when the incentives change, behavior changes. And so the concept that comes to this forefront is, you'll find examples of this. When we look at the life of Fatima al-Zahra, you find her as someone whose full value was not understood in this world. There are glimpses of it. And in understanding and reflecting on this, and I'll come to this in a moment, it's possible that someone who is of a great caliber spiritually is unknown. You know, have you ever looked at, you'll see in the news periodically, somebody who was, a very humble worker, a laborer or a handyman, who spent his whole life living frugally but saved all the income and sometimes became a millionaire and sometimes donated all of that money to a small town. And they didn't even want any recognition while they were alive. They didn't want any plaques. That person's a hero. In that space at least, for sure. And so the idea is, it's not necessary that someone's known. If you look throughout the Bible and as well as in the Quran, you'll find the stories of women that are intertwined that gave rise to these great personalities. You will find the likes, for example, if you read the Bible, you'll find women who are mentioned over and over again. Mary Magdalene is the one who's considered the first person to recognize the resurrection of Christ, for example. You'll find the likes of Leah, or the likes of Rachel, or the likes of Sarah, or Hagar, and all of these are from the Bible perspective. And these are all people who are considered people who either supported in some way or were part of the prophetic mission. Similarly, within Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He mentioned that the people who did good and bad, they had supporters, and the supporters had the ability to choose what they did. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned Fir'aun, and Fir'aun was doing the wrong thing. But He said in His own house, Fir'aun's wife, Asiya, was one of the most exalted of women. Or when it came to the likes of Maryam alayhi salam, her position was extremely exalted relative to any other men of the society perhaps. And barring her son who was Jesus, of course. And then furthermore, you'll find these examples in the Quran of the likes of course, Maryam and, for example, Hajar and all of these aspects. So they're there front and center. But now stay with me here. You'll find that many of our scholars highly recommend things, not a fatwa, but something that they recommend. For example, when it comes to Islamic law, many scholars today, especially in North America and the West, are saying that there should be a clause that is put in the nikah ceremony that gives the female, the woman, the right to initiate a divorce on certain basis. Because otherwise, there may not be a way for the sister to initiate divorce, and someone can abuse that system. I'll give you an example. There are many laws that in spirit they had a good intent, but in practicality they got abused. So if you go to some countries, there's the blasphemy laws that you'll find that were actually remnants of the British at times. And the blasphemy law says you can't blaspheme. So you'll find remnants of this in places like Pakistan and others. The theory was good. The theory was, look, there's a sanctity associated with the Prophet, for example, and we as Muslims respect the Prophet dearer to our hearts than our own parents. So you can't disrespect. That was the theory, but the practical implementation ended up being different. So what ends up happening is, a person who's a Muslim, sometimes he makes a business deal with a Christian in Pakistan, for example, and he doesn't want to, the Muslim, it's time for him to pay back, and he doesn't want to pay back. He just makes a ruling of blaspheme. He makes an accusation that this person blasphemed. And then people take the matter in their own hands, and that person gets punished unjustly. This is not what Islam had the vision of. When you respect the Rasulullah, you have another vision. Remind you. And when you look at the world, you have to have second order effects. You need to keep these things in mind. What are second order effects? I remind you, they say that when the British first came to India, they set up their capital in Delhi. And when they set up their capital in Delhi, they had a problem. What was the problem that they had in Delhi? There were cobras. And the British said, we don't know how to deal with cobra snakes. What are we going to do? So they said, look, let's try to get rid of them. So what did they do? They said, from tomorrow, we're implementing a bounty system. Anyone who brings us a dead cobra will give you money. So then eventually people started bringing dead cobras. When people started bringing dead cobras, one after the other, the rate of cobras in the city began to decline. But eventually it began to stabilize. And then eventually, after more time, it began to increase. So the British said, what on earth is going on? We're paying people to get rid of these cobras, and now the rate of cobras is going up, the number of snakes is going up. They launched an investigation. When they launched an investigation, they went and they found out that in the beginning, when they announced this plan of the bounty of the cobras, people began to bring dead cobras. But for the first time, the British met somebody who could give them a run for their money, and that was the Indians. And the Indian said, this is a very good, I don't know if they were Gujarati or not, but they were Indians. They said that you have a good business opportunity here. Why don't we farm snakes? And so they began to farm snakes. And so they began to bring these farmed snakes and just like we have farmed fish today, they were farming snakes. And they said, here, here, here. And the British said, we are being taken for a ride. And when they realized they were being taken for a ride, they announced, from tomorrow, no bounty. We're not paying a dime, a rupee. We're not paying a paisa. Nothing. No more. You've been swindling us and you've done enough. And then the Indians said, oh, really? So that's how it's going to be? They released all of the farmed cobras into the city. So what intent was of the British was to get rid of all of the cobras. That was their niyyah. What actually ended up happening in practicality was they ended up with 3 times more cobras than originally. Incentives. You and I, as parents, as leaders, as community members, we need to think about the incentives. I'll give you an example if you're interested in finance. Charlie Munger mentioned this, who just passed away recently. He was Warren Buffett's right-hand man. And I'm getting to a point here. Keep these points in mind. And he mentioned that for sometimes in business and in enterprise, sometimes looking at the incentives has an impact. So for example, he mentions a company had a technology 1.0. They had like a fax machine type of product. And then the superior product came out afterwards, like a printer, fax machine, all those things. And that time, a superior product came out. And they were seeing, why is it that eventually when it launched, the people were still buying the older product. They were not buying the superior product. And they found out it was due to the salesman's incentive structure. The salesman got a lot more money if they sold the first one. They got a bigger bonus, a bigger percentage. So they had no skin in the game to sell the new product. Similarly, when it comes to our Imam Bargars, our Husainiyas, our Imam Bargars, and our Masajid, what's the skin in the game for the next generation? I come here, I sit in the front, I can speak in Urdu and in English and all of that, and I'll give you whatever you want, sure. But sometimes we're continuing the model that's been going around for 60, 70, 80 years. And that appeals to one generation. But does that necessarily appeal to the next generation? Does that mean that they're less spiritual? Not necessarily. It just means that they may need another forum, another platform, another point of view. I'm talking to you like this in this environment. There were times, if you go back in history, and this is for my younger ones, Memory Palace. Memory Palace, there's a book called Moonwalking with Einstein that can help you remember things. It's based on the ancient technique the ancient Greeks and Romans used to use to memorize 8-hour speeches by heart. Now, I'm not going to give you an 8-hour speech. You're lucky, you're fortunate. But today we've gotten to a point of maybe 20, 30 minutes. But in the past, there was an environment where lectures were 1 hour, 1.5. Forget the past. Between me and you, I don't have time to mention, but between me, when I go to certain cities in America, Chicago, for example, they don't want a majlis in some places less than an hour and 15 hour, 20 minutes, hour, 30 minutes. And so it's the same environment, same zaman makan. You have to know your audience. I'll give you another example. There's a book called Blue Zones. Blue Zones looks at those places that have the most centenarians, 100-year or older people. And they looked at, sometimes it's their diet, sometimes it's how they live. That has an impact on how long they live. But they noticed that there were some social, psychological factors that increased or decreased someone's lifespan. So what are social, psychological factors? For example, you and I in our society, we have a craze of being young. We have a craze of trying to look younger in some way. But in Okinawa, Japan, or parts of Japan, they don't have that. They actually revere people who are elderly. So they don't say, oh, I'm 40, I'm over the hill. They see age as wisdom. So you know how in our societies, there's this dream of trying to be young, or on the calendars, we see people young, we signify that as beauty, but over there on the calendars you have elderly people, which indicates wisdom. So you're not leftovers of this, the downtrodden of the earth when you're older. You're actually someone who's seen the world, and there's a lot to learn from you. That changes the paradigm of how you operate, number one. Number two, when it comes to the religion of God Almighty, think about this for a moment. Are there things that change? Are there things that don't change? I'll give you an example. Come with me to a time. Now, by the way, I should mention, I'm not giving a fatwa here, but I'm sharing these because some people may discuss these things or think about these things on their drive home from work, or discussing around the table with their loved ones. And they're like thinking about this, but it's never been discussed here on the mimbar, or often isn't, because of different reasons. Because people may say, oh, I heard this for 30 years, must be the truth. I heard this for 40 years, must be the truth. It may be the truth, it may not be the truth. So we have to look at this. So for example, if you look at the history, you will find that when the Islamic Revolution happened in 79, chess was outlawed or banned. Chess, the game. But then this is from 79 to 88. But in 88, it was overturned. Sayyid Khomeini himself overturned his ruling, and he allowed it. And he got a big pushback by other scholars. They said, how can you do this? We have clear traditions from the Ahlul Bayt that said this is not acceptable. And he said, don't look at me, look at the scholars that are more senior to me. And he referred to the scholars who were more senior to him, who allowed it on the basis of it being an intellectual game. Now, I'm not giving you a fatwa, I'm saying follow your marja. But what I'm saying is, the same way that in the halls of academia there are debates and discussions, there are discussions in the halls and the debates of the hawza. Sometimes they don't trickle down to you and I. Similarly, this is one example. Another example was that of riba. Now, all scholars, the majority of opinion on the issue of riba and usury is the same, is that it's not allowed. The same way the Bible prohibited it. In fact, if you went back to the Middle Ages, if they wanted to curse you, today we use 4-letter words and things. If they wanted to curse you at that time, they would call you a usurer. Today, everyone's a usurer in some sense, right? But at that time, it was something that was considered really foul, because it was someone who was sucking the blood of the poor, so to speak. And the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. So this is a commonality. Now, if you come to this, within this, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, who's one of the mainstream of the scholars of Shiaism, he had a different view. He had written Falsafatuna, Iqtisaduna, and he had the view that the term is what? The term is simple. It is it is riba, usury. But usury is not interest, it's different. And he understood what anyone in a first-year MBA or a first-year business school understands in the West, which is the time value of money. And he understood inflation, and he understood that if you give me $1,000 today and I give you $1,000 tomorrow, it's not the same $1,000. Now, I said all of this, why? When it came to Fatima al-Zahra, they were living in an environment, in a scenario where women before her era never had a right. They couldn't speak publicly the way that Fatima al-Zahra spoke. They weren't known to be knowledgeable the way Fatima al-Zahra was knowledgeable. They weren't known to be people who could be supporters and courageous the way that Fatima al-Zahra was in defending Rasulullah. So they were saying, what is this new breed of woman? What is this new breed that we've never dealt with before? And they were having an existential crisis. You and I know today that our sisters, our mothers, our daughters are more than capable. And many times they're much more capable than us. And so when that happens and we understand that, that also needs to be reflected in our actions. What do I mean? As a community and leadership, how much we think about them. Allow me to explain. Let's say you have a long day at work and you're dealing with business all day, and then on top of that you have family obligations, right? You have a loved one, maybe you have people in town, family, you're tired, exhausted. Now imagine for a moment, and America has been doing, and our society does this in a capitalist environment, we have said that someone's value is based on their bank balance. It wasn't always seen as that historically. So there's forums that look at this and they say every year, what is the salary that you would have to give a mother if you were to give her a salary? I'm not trying to get any of you in hot water, but last time I checked, the number was about 145, 150,000. Now with the inflation rate, I don't know, you have to adjust that to 200K or something like that. But the reality is, how do you put a price on motherhood? There's no price on motherhood. It's much beyond that. But the principle is, our society tries to put a value on all of these things. So if a mother is not doing that, then we somehow think that she's less than? No way. We can't. Not from the Islamic perspective or the moral perspective or the human perspective. But now imagine the following. Imagine a mother has spent the whole day, maybe she's working from home or she's working, and then she's looking after her kids. And she's had a long day just like you, and she's looking after the kids, and then you come to the mosque. You know, people never forget how you make them feel. Have you ever heard of that? How you make someone feel matters. You know, and this is a conversation I've been having with a lot of my engineering and tech friends. The healthcare industry is going to be, there's a wave coming. That's already come, but people don't realize it, like a tsunami. You know, for example, if you ever studied tsunamis, the first sign and indicator is before they come to the shore, the water retracts back. It gets sucked up, sort of, in some sense, and then it comes with full force. People who study the phenomenon, even in school, of a tsunami, they know that indicator, but most people don't. Somebody who is a lay person may say, oh, the water's retracting, it looks amazing. A person who studied and knows this is like, we're about to get in serious trouble, we need to evacuate. This is what happened in the tsunami that happened a few years ago as well. Some people were able to save lives because of this. So now what? You know, have you ever noticed sometimes historically at the doctor's office, you know, anywhere else you go in society, the customer service is pretty decent or reasonable, except if you go to some places. But the doctor's office historically has always been a place where people say that I've been treated really badly. Or I can't get the appointment I want, or they treat me the way that, you know, it's as if I'm doing a favor, or they're doing me a favor. But now, Amazon and other companies have gotten into the game, and they're saying that we're going to revamp this and give excellent customer service, and we're going to automate this and AI this, and all of these things are happening. By the way, it's not I was in Australia, and they were telling me that King's College and other universities have already integrated AI into their curriculums. 3 years first, if you want to be a doctor, 3 years of AI, then followed by medicine thereafter. And so what I'm saying is the world is changing around us. But are we changing or understanding the world around us? So now, a mother spends her whole day and she's tired and she brings the child here. Do we know things about our children even? There's a whole science of children that we're not aware of. Have you ever seen a toddler, 2 years old, 2.5 maybe, or under? Try to tell them, try this experiment at home if you have someone under 2 years old, or 2.5 even. It goes up to 3, sometimes even more. You ask a 2-year-old, here's a banana, here's an apple. Give me the apple. And they'll give you the apple. Give me the banana. They'll give you the banana. And then now try to tell them, don't give me the banana. Give me the other thing. What will they give you? And many times you'll find they don't hear the don't part. They just hear banana, familiarity, and give it. This is called the notion of negation. Negation, that concept, doesn't instill into children after up until 2.5, 3, sometimes 4 years of age. So you're yelling at a child who's 2 years old who doesn't even know what negation is. So you're telling them, not banana. You're saying, oh, banana, here. And sometimes we ruin a child by yelling at them. I remind you, when I was in Turkey, and I'll conclude here. When I was in Turkey, there used to be a wall, and I was getting a tour, and many of you may have been there as well. In the masajids there, in the mosques there, they have a saying on some of them that says something in the back. If you don't, and you ask the tour guide, and he'll tell you, he said, what does it say? He says, it says something very clearly. It says, it's an old saying that we have. He said, if you don't hear children crying in the mosque, be very afraid of the future of your generations. Why? Because if they're not coming there at that age and they're not crying and you don't give them a safe space to feel comfortable, what on earth makes you think they're going to be here in 5, 10, 15 years? You know, that mother who comes and who's gone through a tough day, we sometimes say, mothers today, they don't know how to take care of their children. But do you imagine how difficult it is to be a mother in today's day and age? I'm not saying it was easier back in the day, but what I'm saying is it hasn't gotten much easier at all. In fact, it may have gotten harder. Ask me when people reach out to me and they say that, can you help in matrimony or something of this nature? And you ask people, okay, what are you looking for? So the guy's side of the family says, we're looking for a very righteous, pious Muslim woman, for example. Okay, very good, excellent. We want her to be a doctor or something of this nature. We want her to be attractive. We want her to be fair-skinned. These are two different things. We want her to be X, Y, and Z. And at that time they say religious, so you mean like hijab? Oh, no, we don't want hijab. Now what I'm saying here is, by the way, again, this is the problem that I mentioned last night. We are just looking at one aspect of the equation of what is the dynamic of just judging someone just based on whether they're wearing physical hijab or not. I'm not giving any fatwas here. Follow your marja. But what I'm saying is, what if someone's on a spiritual journey? Did everyone who today wears hijab always wear hijab? Maybe not. And maybe the person who's wearing hijab today, maybe they're not going to be wearing it tomorrow. And forget that, what about men's hijab? As a concept, as a notion. Mutahari mentioned this in his book, that he said, look, the whole issue arises when we conflate the notion of hijab and chadar. Chadar is something else. Chadar was the physical manifestation of the concept, but the ruling was first to men to lower your gaze. And so that's something that we need to be very cognizant about. What is it like to be a sister growing up in a society, in a world like this? When we create the mosques and the masajid of the future, we need to make sure that we make people comfortable. Make people feel as though they belong. They make people feel as though this is a place, when they're having a rough day, this is the place to come and feel like they're in a sanctuary. But believe me, if you go nationally and globally, you'll find that if you had a rough day, the last place you want to come to is the mosque. Many a times that's the case. Why? Because this person's there, that person's there. Maybe sometimes people are judgmental. Not always the case, but sometimes. But if we change our perspective to understand that everyone's on a spiritual journey, and if I think that I'm ahead at one moment, I could be behind another moment. And if I think that I'm behind, I could catch up. And what do we know what the true metrics of religiosity are? Allah knows. So the point that I'm driving at with respect to Fatima al-Zahra, these people who came as adversaries to Fatima, they would say, who is this? This is just a girl, an 18-year-old girl. How dare she speak to us like this? When in reality, Islam said, no. You're looking at her age. You're looking at her being a gender, her female. What you're not seeing is her intellect. And she's explaining to you her intellect through her words. What you're not seeing is her eloquence. What you're not seeing is all of that. But even when people were able to see it, some of them, they still gravitated and pulled back to their old pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah self. The point being this: as people of faith living in the 20th century, we need to understand what it means to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt in the true sense. The women around the Ahlul Bayt were strong women, but they supported their strong men as well, their strong husbands as well, on the journey to goodness. And they supported each other to get stronger. And hence they were each other's rock. If you want to know what true love is, perhaps read the writings of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the sayings of Amir al-Mu'mineen about Fatima al-Zahra. Where he would say, for example, a flower that came from heaven and returned to heaven and left its fragrance in my mind. Or that letter, they say, that he wrote to Rasulullah, the speech he said to Rasulullah's grave after he buried Fatima al-Zahra. There was no doubt there was immense love between Ali and Fatima, because they were two people who understood how difficult it is to take the right path, and they supported each other on that way. And they made their lives tranquil for one another. When it comes to being someone who's a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, we need to be those like Fatima al-Zahra, like Zainab, like Ahlul Bayt, who try to help make people the best versions of themselves and allow them the spiritual space to be compassionate, caring, and friendly. I leave the rest for tomorrow. But what we learn from Fatima is that there's no limitation on the spiritual heights that any gender can reach, especially not women. Women have shown knowledge, charisma, eloquence, leadership, the likes of Zainab salamullahi alayha, Fatima Zahra, which the world has not seen. And sometimes we need to understand that model of leadership as well, more than anything else. But what did this world do? Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Rasulullah's life is to spend 23 years in public propagation and 40 years in silent propagation, 63 years of full propagation in this world, and do so much hard work, and at the end of his life know that all of this hard work that he's done will be undone in a few years. Not even a few years, a few months, a few days. This Rasulullah, who fought so hard to make sure everyone had a fair shot, just within a few years to a few days to a few months, all of his hard work would have water spilt over it and milk spilt over it because of certain people trying to looking after their own nepotism, their own greed, their own desires. Amir al-Mu'mineen Fatima Zahra fought against this. Ajrukum Allah, the narrations say that when Fatima Zahra, she was in a state where some people came to her door. Now the details of the incident of the door I leave to you, but there are historians and writers who wrote in the books of history, the likes of Shibli Nomani. Shibli Nomani is not a Shia scholar, he's an Ahl Sunnah journalist and author and historian. And he said, with respect to the incident of the door, I don't have the time to go into the details of this, he writes, but he says that with respect to this, it's clear to me, knowing the demeanor of the second Khalifa, and knowing his anger, and knowing the incident where he beat his own sister violently, it would not surprise me if what the Shia say that happened to Fatima actually happened. It would not surprise me. This was the daughter of Rasulullah. Fatima bad'atun minni. A principle that comes here, that whoever strikes a woman cannot be a Haydari. They can be something else, but they cannot be a follower of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the principle here also comes that the follower of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, the follower of Zainab al-Kubra, she is also someone who has the love and the compassion that Fatima al-Zahra had for Amir al-Mu'mineen. That she stood and she protected and she stood for the rights of Amir al-Mu'mineen when society had abandoned Amir al-Mu'mineen. Or Zainab Uliya Maqam, who stood for her brother, who stood for her nephew, Imam al-Sajjad. The defenders of the deen at times, and at many pivotal times, were these great ladies and these great women. So there's no shortage of the caliber. But tonight, my dear brothers and sisters, turn your hearts to Medina. Medina of Rasulullah, where Fatima al-Zahra is crying out, "Subbat alayya masaibun, law annaha subbat ala al-ayyam sarana layaliya." That Baba, after you, those calamities befell me, that if they fell on the dark day, on the days, they would become the dark nights. They say that when Fatima al-Zahra was struck on the door, they say that according to the narrations, when these people, they came and they brought fire to the door of Fatima al-Zahra. This is that moment where they came with aggression to the house of Rasulullah. This is the same house that Rasulullah would pass by in the morning and say, "Assalamu alayka, ya Ahl Bayt al-Nabuwa." He would say that, "Oh, salams on you, oh the Ahlul Bayt of Rasulullah, of the Messenger, of the Prophet." And at that point in time, this is the same house that they say, "Send Abul Hasan out, otherwise we'll burn this door." They said, "The Hasanain are in this house." He said, "What if? So if, let it be." So what? Let it be. And if so, that was something that allowed for the ability for the world to let Karbala happen. Karbala happened there. As our scholars have written, Fattimiyya is Ashura, because the seeds were planted and the foundation of Islam was cracked to the point that it allowed for what would happen in Karbala to happen when they said there's no sanctity of the daughter of Rasulullah. This tribal mindset that was from pre-Islamic Arabian Jahiliyyah is what crept back into Islam and needs to be put back into the history pages and not into Islam. This was not the Islam that Rasulullah envisaged. This was not the Islam that Imam Ali alayhi salam envisaged. But tonight, my dear brothers and sisters, give your condolences and your thoughts and your prayers to not only Fatima al-Zahra, but to Rasulullah. Not only to Rasulullah, but to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Not only to Amir al-Mu'mineen. But tonight, give your condolences to the children of Fatima al-Zahra, Hassan al-Mujtaba, Zainab al-Kubra, Kulthum, And of course, Hussein ibn Ali. This Hussein, who was in the womb of Fatima al-Zahra, according to narrations, for 6 months. And he was born premature. And the same Fatima al-Zahra would say, my father, Baba, this child who's in my womb, he speaks to me. And Rasulullah said, Fatima, what does this child say to you? He says these certain things that I'm trying to understand. My father, explain them to me. He said, what does he say? He says, my mother, ana al-gharib. He said, my mother, I'm the stranger, the one without a land, the one who's a traveler, the one who has no one for them. He said, Fatima, does he say anything else? He says, yes, he does. He says, what else does he say? He says, my mother, ana al-atshan. My mother, I'm thirsty. My father, what does this mean? What does this mean? At that point in time, Rasulullah, and the narration continues, Rasulullah says, Fatima, sit down, I need to tell you something. And Rasulullah narrates the whole incident of what will happen in Karbala to Rasulullah. You know, we give our condolences to Fatima al-Zahra. Tonight, give your condolences to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on the passing of his mother Fatima al-Zahra, Ayatullah Wahid al-Khurasani. He says, what would you say if a nation had a father and that father heard such devastating news that he fell not once, not twice, but 3 times in one day, in one moment? He says, what would you say? Would you not mark that day? Would you not commemorate that day? He says, there was a day like this. Ayatullah Wahid says, the day was when the news reached the ear of Ali al-Murtada that Fatima has left this world. The narrations say that Hassan and Hussein came from the house of Rasulullah, the house of Fatima and Ali. They left and they came to the masjid that was a few steps away. Remember, وَسَدَّ الْأَبْوَابَ إِلَّا بَابَ. All the doors were ordered to be closed except the door of Ali and Fatima. That door opened into the masjid. Hassan and Hassanain come and they say, Baba, our mother has left this world. Our mother has gone. They say Amir al-Mu'mineen fell unconscious on the ground. Fatih Khaybar fell to the ground. They say a moment later he gained consciousness. He took a few more steps. He fell to the ground once again. The news of the death of Fatima affected Ali al-Murtada so much. They say a 3rd time Ali got up and then he collapsed a 3rd time. This is Fatih Khaybar who's falling. Magar azadaro do jumle, ye ek marhala, Ali 3 बार गिरे, फातिमा ज़हरा से आने तक, मगर एक वो मरहला था जब कहते हैं कि सलमान बाहर खड़े थे, एक चीख सुनाई दी, कहा है फातिह खैबर, ए अबुल हसन, अगर कोई पूछता कि अरब में सबसे शुजा कौन, सबसे दिलेर कौन, हम कहते अली मुर्तज़ा, ये बताइएगा, हमने एक चीख सुनी जब आप गुस्ल दे रहे थे, बताइएगा कि हमने क्या सुना। कुछ रिवायतों में कहते हैं कि शायद ज़ैनब ने पूछा, जिसने भी पूछा, मुर्तज़ा ने कहा कि मैं क्या बताऊं, फातिमा की पसलियां टूट गई, फातिमा ने हमें बताया नहीं, ऐसे इतने दिन कैसे गुजारे। फातिमा ज़हरा ने अला लानतुल्लाहि अलल क़ौमिज़ ज़ालिमीन व सयअलमुल लज़ीना ज़लमू अय्यम मुनक़लिबिन यनक़लिबून लिल्लाहि व इन्ना इलैहि राजिऊन। Final request to please recite a Fatiha for Marhum Onali Chattu, for your Marhameen, for our Marhameen, and for all those who do not have someone to recite a Fatiha for them tonight. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Fatima Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra,
फातिमा ज़हरा सब मिलके
फातिमा ज़हरा, फातिमा
ज़हरा
پردہ شب میں میری میت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ پردہ شب میں میری میت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ پس لیا توڑی گئی کیسے یہ بتلاؤں گی میں، حشر کے میدان میں بھی اس حال میں آؤں گی میں، ہاتھ پہلو سے نہ تم میرا ہٹانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ وہ مصیبت آپ نے اچھا ہوا دیکھی نہیں، اب میں سیدھے ہاتھ سے تسبیح پڑھ سکتی نہیں، ایسا کن فزنے ہے مارا تازیانہ یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ کہتی ہے زینب یہ مجھ سے دیکھ کر چہرہ میرا، آپ کے رخسار پر یہ نیل ہے کیسا پرا، میں نے کھایا ہے تماچا مت بتانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ تازیانے کی اذیت کا اٹھانا ایک طرف، وہ تماچے قتل محسن در جلانا ایک طرف، سب سے مشکل تھا مگر دربار جانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ جب میری تلقین پڑھنا یاد کر لینا ذرا، در کے گرنے سے میرا بازو بھی ہے ٹوٹا ہوا، میرے شانوں کو ذرا دیرے ہلانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ چاہے آ جائے قیامت مجھ سے یہ وعدہ کرو، جب تلک مولا میرے شبیر کی مرضی نہ ہو، تب تلک میرا جنازہ مت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے
تم سے زہرا یا علی.
جب سے آئی ہوں پلٹ کر فکر ہے مجھ کو یہی، میں تو پردے میں گئی پھر بھی ضعیفہ ہو گئی. بیردہ دربار ہے زینب کو جانا یا علی، آج رخصت
ہو رہی
ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. سورۃ المبارکۃ الفاتحہ.
المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين. السلام عليكم ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى ابن مولى. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا سلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.